I watched a weird video 6 days ago. Figure I may as well get this review out there. Alright, so it wasn't 6 days ago. It was actually more like an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. Welcome to Rotted, review of the day. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 2016/17, depends on the source we're looking at, movie Rings. This is the third film in the Americanized franchise, the first coming out in 2002, the second coming out in 2005. We've waited a little while now, and apparently we have a third one. Unlike the first two, this does not have Naomi Watts. In fact, it ditches the entire cast altogether and starts over fresh. And the general notion of this movie, if you've never heard of the Rings franchise before, is you watch a videotape, you get a phone call saying 7 days. 7 days later, you're dead. And the videotape is full of creepy imagery. And that's, the most bare bones basic element of the storyline. And the first film, I thought I really enjoyed both the Japanese Ringu series as well as the American Ring series, and I found that often a lot of people like one or the other. If you like the Japanese one, you consider the American remake to be unnecessary. If you like the American one, the Japanese one can seem a bit slow and disjointed, and the effects not quite on the same level. I really enjoy both for unique reasons unto their own. Like I've said before in the review of the Haunted House Project, I am a big fan of Asian horror. And I really don't have any major complaints about the Americanized version of The Ring or The Ring 2. I actually enjoyed both, although the first one more. I thought it was an interesting kind of mystery that unfolded, the history behind Samara and the disturbing imagery and the events that Naomi Watts went through in trying to figure out how to avoid her impending death in 7 days. And moreover, I thought the performances by her son was pretty phenomenal as well. Now we have a third one. Now it rewrites not the rules, but it kind of starts over. And the premise of this one starts out as a mystery unto its own. It doesn't change the rules, but it does kind of come up with a parallel plot line. The notion of this is a young couple. One of them goes off to college, and then while he's off to college, she starts not receiving phone calls back from him, finds out that he's been a part of an analytical academia kind of approach to the videotape. And a professor played, I thought, very well by Johnny Galecki, as the professor that is running these experiments, I guess is the best word for it. And I don't really want to give a whole lot more away. We will be having a deep dive discussion video with spoilers abound. But as with all of the Rotted reviews, just the reviews, this is going to be spoiler free. So let's go ahead and break this down into our normal 5 categories, each category worth up to 20 points, for a total possible scoring of 100 points. Let's see how the Rings stacks up. Oh, not the Rings, just Rings. Plot and subtext. I went ahead and tossed this a 13 out of 20. And the reason I did that is because I was thoroughly enjoying it up until it took a shift in the plot line that, for me, and I want to cover this a lot more in the deep dive, but the best part of a good horror film is the mysterious element to it. You're tossed into a world as an audience member when you're approaching a new franchise, a new film, new storyline that is already somewhat established as far as in the writer's mind and on the page. And as the characters are figuring things out, you're figuring things out. What is this evil? What is its origin? How do I fight it? Can I fight it? Am I doomed from the start? What's going on? The problem with sequels inherently is we already know everything. The mystery has been solved by the first movie. the most it can really do as a sequel is add more on. The thing that I liked about where Rings started out was it didn't try to necessarily add things on to the mystery. It tried to change what the mystery was. It already said, okay, well, you know what's going on with the video. You know what happened with Samara and so forth. Now we're going to take this couple and we're going to make this person go missing and this person try to find them. The tape and the ring element is simply an added component of this totally separate mystery that we're going to explore. Why isn't he returning the phone calls? Why are people that were friendly to her all of a sudden not anymore? Who is this professor? Why is he being elusive? It was an interesting mystery unto itself. And then it took a shift that, in my mind, made it like a parallel universe of the first movie. By the time the second act really started getting rolling, it felt like I was watching The Ring all over again, but a carbon copy offshoot of it. And so I had to mark the plot down for that. I did kind of end up liking where it was going, but it was such a shift, and I was enjoying it so much in the first place that it did throw me, and I wound up losing a bit of interest in the mystery behind what was going on. I stopped trying to, figure out, who's doing what and why. I kind of just started, a switch flipped into my head that just said, maybe it's time to stop caring so much about this one. So, 13 out of 20 for that. Respectable, but I would have enjoyed it more if they had stretched out what they were doing in the first place. Intent of this was a cash grab, but moreover, without getting too jaded in here, the intent of this was to be a scary film. It was straight up trying to be scary, jump scares, creepy scares, and also have that mysterious element to it. Tack on to the existing franchise while adding something new, a new element to it, further exploring some of the original mysteries that never necessarily got answered, such as, well, I don't want to give it away, but in going forward, it also went backwards through some more backstory. And in that regard, I thought it did a fair job of that. But again, to me, the scares come from the mystery, and the mystery wasn't there by the end of it. Because with the horror film, typically the scares tend to ramp up, and as I explained in the plot subtext scoring, about the time that the mystery would have been ramping up and the scares would have been ramping up, the mystery took a dive, and I stopped caring a whole lot, and the scares, I think, suffered as a result. There were a few good, little shocker moments in there, but on the whole, it was interesting, but it wasn't compelling. The acting is where I thought this really stood out. Johnny Galecki, I thought, did a very good job. I was very surprised partway through that all of a sudden Vincent D'Onofrio popped up. I love him. But moreover, the actual actors that don't have a lot of name brand gravitas to them, their resumes aren't a mile long like those two. I thought even they did a really, really good job. The principal actress, Matilda Anna Ingrid Lutz, I thought did, as Matilda Lutz, she did very good. I have no complaints about that. I gave the acting a 16 out of 20. I don't think it's going to get an Academy Award, but that is by and far the better part of the movie for me. The effects. I really have to give the effects on this one. I thought that everything about it was very tight, very seamless. What they were going for, they knocked out of the park. The CG was wonderful. Nothing about it felt like, I was watching CG. I don't have any problem with computer effects at all. For me, it's just how well it's used, how often it's used, how much it's used in conjunction with practical effects, and you could tell that there was a good marriage between the two, and whoever was using them, it was like a good carpenter knowing which tool to use at what time. And I thought they did a very, very good job in Rings. The effects, I wanted, when I first was scouting out a movie to watch for this particular review, I wanted something effects laden, and that's kind of why I went with a bit of a blockbuster-ish kind of movie as opposed to a smaller indie B movie. And whether or not it delivered, I wanted it to have a good foundation. I wanted it to have effects that I can do a proper scoring one way or the other, and I was pleased that it went the way of being very, very good. Fear quotient, again, that's where it really starts to fall down for me. It wasn't scary. The first Ring, there were parts of it that scared the bejesus out of me, and I loved that. But this is, like I said, the problem with sequels in general. You know what's happened. You know that when they spin that chair around, you look at the person's face, that it's going to have that effect to it. You know everything, and with knowledge comes a lack of scares. Fear comes from the unknown, which is why the best horror movies are mystery movies. And as you know them, as you find them out, as you understand the plot points, as you understand the evil, the less scary it becomes. Then you start having to rely on jump scares, and those take a very measured hand to pull off effectively. And I will say that this movie did not handle those nearly as well as the first two. The timing was just a bit off. Even so, it didn't scare me, but I thought there were still some really great moments in the film that I'll be discussing in the deep dive video. I don't want to sound like I'm just really railing on it, because I did enjoy it. If you are a fan of The Ring, or The Ring 2, or the Ringu franchise, more so The Ring, I would say that this is worth watching. So it does get my my recommendation, even though the total score came to 67 out of 100 possible points. I do recommend it. Next, after you watch it, I invite you to take a look at the spoiler-filled deep dive video. We'll discuss it and see what you think then. In the meantime, next time you want to pick out a horror film, first make sure that it's good and rotted.